Moonlight spilled through the tall windows of the Miller mansion, throwing long shadows across the silent hallway. Daniel's footsteps echoed as he wandered, restless, his mind burning with thoughts of freedom from his father's grip. At the far end of the West Wing, a door stood alone, its dark wood scarred with age. Something about it pulled him closer. He reached for the brass handle, rattling it gently. Locked. But in the silence that followed, he thought he heard movement inside. Before he could lean in, a cold voice sliced through the air. "What are you doing here?" Daniel froze. Richard stood behind him, his silhouette sharp against the dim light, eyes hard as steel. He stepped forward, gripping Daniel's arm with unsettling force. "This room is not for you," Richard said, his voice low, controlled, but laced with threat. Daniel jerked his arm back. "Then what's inside? Why lock it away?" Richard's jaw tightened, silence heavy between them before he spoke. "Only ruin. Stay away, or you'll regret it." For a moment, father and son stood in tense silence, their breaths sharp, eyes locked like enemies. Then Richard turned and walked away, his footsteps deliberate, leaving Daniel standing before the door, heart pounding. From the shadows, Elena's figure appeared for just a second, watching with unreadable eyes. When Daniel looked toward her, she vanished back into the dark like she'd never been there. That night, lying awake in his room, Daniel's mind replayed the encounter. Sleep refused him. As he rose for water, he passed by his father's study. Through the slightly open door came Richard's hushed voice, urgent, strained. "If he ever finds out," Richard whispered into the phone, "everything collapses." Daniel's chest tightened. His father wasn't just hiding something. He was terrified of it being revealed. The morning sun filtered into the grand dining hall, catching the edges of silverware and crystal glasses. Catherine sat in her usual silence, staring at her untouched coffee, while Richard read the newspaper with rigid focus. Daniel entered late, his eyes darting toward the West Wing doors visible from the hall. As he sat, he tested the silence. Strange how no one ever goes to that part of the house. The West Wing feels like a ghost's corridor. The words dropped like a stone. Elena, carrying a tray of fruit, froze. The porcelain plate slipped from her hands and shattered against the marble floor. The sound was deafening. Her face drained of color as she stammered an apology, avoiding Daniel's gaze. Richard's eyes snapped up, burning with warning. "Eat your breakfast, Daniel," he ordered, voice calm but heavy with menace. Daniel leaned back, studying them all. His mother's fingers trembled against her teacup. Elena hurried out, her steps quick, her silence louder than words. Later, Daniel cornered her in the hallway. "Why does that door scare you?" he pressed. She shook her head fiercely, her lips trembling. "Some doors should never open." Her whisper was more a plea than an answer, and before he could demand more, she turned and walked away. Uneasy, Daniel searched the mansion's library. Dusty shelves yielded an old blueprint, corners yellowed with time. His pulse quickened when he saw it. The West Wing had been redesigned after a supposed fire. But the outline showed a room that was never mentioned in family records. He traced the lines with his finger, heart racing. Then his eyes caught something odd. A hidden compartment in Edward's old study, drawn faintly in pencil. Hours later, with trembling hands, Daniel pried it open. Inside lay a single rusted key. The key felt heavy in Daniel's palm, colder than metal should be. As he slipped it into his pocket, he sensed eyes on him. Turning, he found Edward standing in the doorway of the study, his frame tall yet fragile, eyes sharp with secrets. "Curiosity," Edward said softly, his voice carrying more weight than the silence around them, "has destroyed stronger men than you." Daniel's throat tightened. "Then tell me the truth. What happened in that room?" Edward stepped closer, leaning on his cane, his expression unreadable. "Your father's sins are older than you think." His words trailed like smoke, refusing to settle. Daniel's frustration broke. "Stop speaking in riddles! Was someone in our family kept there?" His voice cracked, part anger, part desperation. Edward's gaze faltered, and for a moment, guilt flickered across his face. He opened his mouth, but before he could answer, the study door slammed open. Richard stormed in, fury blazing in his eyes. "Enough!" Richard's voice thundered. He strode across the room, snatching the blueprint from Daniel's hand. "Stay out of my affairs, father. And He turned to Daniel, his face inches away, voice sharp as a blade. "Forget this nonsense before you tear this family apart." The air grew heavy. Daniel's chest heaved, his fists clenched, while Edward lowered his gaze, trapped between silence and truth. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her hands trembling against the frame, but she said nothing. Her eyes shimmered with fear. Glass shattered as Richard slammed the blueprint onto the desk. The sound echoed long after his footsteps faded. When the room was finally quiet, Edward leaned toward Daniel, voice trembling, almost a whisper. "If you open that door, you will never look at your father the same way again." Thunder cracked above the mansion as rain battered against the windows. Daniel stood before the west wing door, the rusted key shaking in his hand. His breath came shallow, his heartbeat louder than the storm. With a trembling push, he slid the key into the lock. The metal groaned, and the door creaked open, releasing a stale, suffocating air, as if the room itself had been holding its breath for decades. Inside, the world was frozen in time, dust-covered furniture draped in white sheets. A child's toy train lay toppled on the floor, its wheels rusted. On a small desk, a blood-stained handkerchief rested beside an old photograph of a boy Daniel had never seen before. The name on the back chilled him. Michael Miller, 1979. His supposed uncle, the one no one ever spoke of. He opened a wooden box hidden beneath the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, reports marked missing, and files stamped with Richard's signature. Pages told a different story: a violent fight, a disappearance, and a cover-up. Daniel staggered back, bile rising in his throat. His father hadn't just locked away a room, he had locked away a life. A shadow moved in the doorway. Richard stepped inside, silent, his presence filling the room like a storm. His voice was calm, too calm. "Now you know why it must stay buried." Daniel's eyes burned with anger and grief. "You lied to all of us. You..." His words broke into silence. Richard closed the door behind him with a soft click. The key turned in his hand. His face darkened as he whispered, "You've seen too much, Daniel, and in this family, knowledge is a death sentence."